She always believed that their love was strong and their marriage honest. But after Martin Wilson's death, Eleanor discovered a truth he never spoke of. A past buried in war. A letter that changed everything, and a search for answers that could rewrite the story they thought they knew. Before we dive into the story, let me know where you're tuning in from today, and if you believe in the power of truth and compassion, be sure to like this video and subscribe for more. Weeks earlier, when Martin died suddenly in a car accident on a rainy evening, Eleanor believed the worst was behind her. She had been married to him for 30 years. He was a charming man, refined, with warm eyes and a quick smile. As a diplomat, he traveled often. She grew accustomed to the demands of his schedule, the sudden calls from overseas. He was the center of her life, her anchor, and losing him so abruptly left her feeling unmoored. In the immediate aftermath, her days were blurred by funeral arrangements, calls from distant acquaintances, the mechanical tasks of settling his affairs. She wept at odd times. While washing dishes or folding laundry, she might recall a gentle gesture of his or a private joke they'd shared, and fresh tears would erupt. But she carried on. In her mind, that was love's quiet aftermath. The arrival of the anonymous envelope changed everything. At first, she considered throwing it away, but something about it nagged at her. She phoned a close friend, an old college roommate named Sarah, and read her the cryptic note. Sarah was alarmed. Could it be a con? Some charlatan who heard about Martin's passing and wants money? But the note didn't mention money, only gave Eleanor instructions to meet a person called Charlotte, who has information about your husband's true work. That phrase haunted Eleanor, though she tried to dismiss it. She told herself that Martin had been a diplomat for the British government, that his postings to various embassies were well documented. What else was there to know? She fought her doubts for days, holding onto the letter each night, staring at it after dinner while the television droned. Finally, she decided to go. She had to. The address turned out to be a tidy townhouse in a quieter section of the city, not far from her own home yet feeling strangely remote. The neighborhood was hushed, tree-lined streets, well-kept gardens. She knocked on the door with trembling fingers. When it opened, she found herself face to face with a tall woman in her early 60s, hair in a short no-nonsense style, wearing a conservative blouse and slacks. The woman introduced herself as Charlotte. She beckoned Eleanor in without fuss, shutting the door carefully behind them. They sat in a living room that had the air of a controlled environment. Eleanor noticed minimal decor. A few books on shelves, a single painting of a coastal scene, a Spartan couch and armchair. Charlotte observed her from across the small coffee table, measuring her reaction. Then she spoke with a voice steady and low, as though used to delivering difficult news. "I'm sorry for your loss," Charlotte said. "Martin's death was unexpected for all of us. I've known about you for many years, though we never met." Eleanor blinked, a tremor of unease running through her. "You said, in that note, you had information about my husband's true work. I don't understand. Martin was a diplomat. That's no secret." Charlotte offered a ghost of a smile. "No, it's not. Except Martin was never only a diplomat. He was recruited during the final days of the Cold War for intelligence work. He served as an undercover operative, if you will, for British intelligence." Eleanor felt her pulse pound. She tried to refute it. "No, Martin would have told me. 30 years of marriage. How could I not have known?" Charlotte's gaze flickered. "That's exactly how deep he was. He was exceptionally skilled. At first, his role was to maneuver within the diplomatic corps, gleaning classified or sensitive trade information from certain targets. Then, at some point, the directive shifted. He was told to seduce the daughter of a British trade official with ties to the Soviet sphere. That daughter was you." Eleanor's body went rigid. She stared, unable to form words. Her father had been a trade official indeed, often traveling to Eastern Europe for negotiations. But the notion that Martin had specifically targeted her, that their love story began as a mission, her stomach lurched in horror. She tried to stand, wanting to flee. Charlotte calmly raised a hand. "I'm sorry," she said, "but you need to hear this if you want to protect yourself. There are complications. Martin abandoned his mission eventually. He went rogue, as we say, out of genuine love for you. He refused to deliver certain intelligence that would compromise your father. He paid a high price for that decision, but he stayed with you by choice. That's why I asked you here. Others may now think you hold something of Martin's. Something dangerous. Eleanor's throat felt dry. She demanded evidence. Charlotte showed her old personnel memos, references to Operation Skylark, a coded name for Martin's infiltration, bits of correspondence from a decade prior, referencing the difficulties of controlling Martin once he bonded with the target. The word target in reference to her left Eleanor feeling ill. She realized the entire shape of her marriage might be a shadow cast by a lie. But Charlotte insisted Martin's love became real. Eleanor stormed out. She felt betrayal coursing through her veins, outraged that a stranger presumed to rewrite her life story. Yet, she couldn't quell the ring of truth in Charlotte's voice. Over the next days, she tore through the house, searching for anything that might confirm or deny Charlotte's claims. She rifled through Martin's desk, reread old letters he wrote her from overseas. She found places where his wording felt vaguely cryptic, warm on the surface, but always avoiding deeper details about his missions. She recalled how certain embassy events made him tense or watchful. She thought of the times he would gently caution her, "Be mindful who you share stories with." She had dismissed those as normal diplomatic concerns. Now, the potential meaning made her tremble. Amid her turmoil, another shock arrived. One evening, returning from groceries, she found her apartment ransacked. Every drawer pulled out, cushions sliced open, books tossed about. She didn't see signs of casual theft. Her electronics and jewelry remained. Instead, it was as if the intruder methodically searched for something intangible. She stood in the wreckage, heart hammering, unsure if she should call the police. Ultimately, she did. Officers arrived, asked standard questions. Nothing seemed stolen. They labeled it a peculiar break-in, perhaps a bungled robbery. They told her to keep an eye out for further trouble. When the police left, she sat on the floor, hugging her knees. It was only days after Charlotte's revelation. Now, someone was clearly searching for something. Could it be that Martin left behind secrets he never told her about? She phoned Charlotte, voice shaking. Charlotte, sounding oddly calm, told her that a man named Dmitry Sokolov, once a Soviet operative turned freelance intelligence broker, might suspect Martin had hidden incriminating evidence, something that exposed Sokolov's operations. If so, Sokolov or his people would be desperate to find it. Charlotte advised vigilance, urging Eleanor to hide anything that belonged to Martin. The conversation left Eleanor's head spinning. She hardly knew Charlotte, yet Charlotte seemed to know more about Martin's hidden world than anyone else. Though she tried to keep her composure in public, inside she felt raw anger. How dare Martin drag her into something so dangerous? She had devoted decades to him, believed in his causes, followed him overseas, trusting his sense of duty. Now, she realized that duty had been to a secret web of espionage. She felt cheated and lost, wanting to hate Martin for his deception. Yet she remembered his unguarded moments, the tenderness in his eyes each evening when they shared a glass of wine, or the care with which he brushed her hair back from her forehead. Could he have feigned all that? Charlotte's words echoed in her mind. He went rogue out of genuine love. That was the only thread that gave her comfort. She needed to know the truth, if only to salvage the last shred of her faith in him. In the days that followed, she began a painstaking investigation. First, she combed through Martin's personal items, searching for any clue about what might be hidden. She found old receipts for weekend trips, postcards, a few dusty cassette tapes from the 1990s. Nothing that seemed relevant. She visited her father's old house, rummaging through stored boxes in the attic, hoping for some lead about Martin's infiltration. Her father had passed years ago, leaving behind only sparse records of his trade missions. She encountered vague references to suspicious phone calls overseas, but nothing obviously connected to Martin. She felt her frustration mount, along with a creeping sense of vulnerability. If Sokolov's people were searching her home, they might also watch her movements. She confronted Charlotte again, pressing her for more details. Charlotte admitted she had once been Martin's handler, then became a double-check liaison when Martin's loyalties began to shift. She had tried to help him extricate himself quietly, but after the Cold War ended, the intelligence agencies in chaos let certain rogue operatives slip through the cracks. Sokolov was one of them. Martin, apparently, had gathered damning evidence of Sokolov's side deals and dirty operations, but he never handed it in officially. Instead, he had hidden it for reasons Charlotte could only guess at. Possibly he feared retribution or wanted leverage to protect Eleanor. Charlotte warned Eleanor that Sokolov was ruthless. If he suspected that Martin's wife possessed the evidence, he would stop at nothing to get it. Eleanor's days became haunted. She woke up tense, scanning the street from her window. She noticed a dark sedan parked across from her building on multiple occasions, the driver never quite visible. She received phone calls at odd hours. If she answered, the line was dead, or sometimes a faint breathing. Twice, she found typed notes shoved under her door, warning her to stay out of matters that don't concern her. She kept them in a drawer, uncertain whether to take them to the police. Each day, the question pounded in her mind. Where would Martin have hidden something so important? She began reconstructing Martin's routines. He had always loved a small lake house a few hours north of the city, a retreat they shared in summers, eventually buying it outright so they could get away from the diplomatic hustle. She remembered how he once called it their sanctuary, a place to escape all the noise of the outside world. During his final year, he often visited alone, claiming he needed quiet. At the time, she thought it was just to rest from the stress of constant traveling, or maybe to fix up the property. Now she wondered if he had used that house to store something crucial, far from prying eyes. One weekend, she drove to the lake house, a mixture of longing and dread in her chest. The drive was scenic, rolling hills giving way to winding roads flanked by pines. The property was just as she remembered. A small, rustic cabin perched by the water, with a narrow dock that jutted out over the lake. The place smelled of damp wood and pine needles. She let herself in, flicked on lights. Dust motes swirled in the stale air. The small rooms seemed to echo with memories of Martin laughing, flipping pancakes on the old stove, or reading by lamplight in an armchair. Now, every memory felt suspect, overshadowed by the knowledge that he had once set out to deceive her. She methodically searched every corner, pulling out drawers, feeling under furniture. Hours passed with no success. Exhausted, she sank onto the couch, tears prickling her eyes. As she gazed around in frustration, her eyes landed on a large antique globe that stood by the window. It was an odd piece. Martin had acquired it at a flea market years ago, saying it added character to the house. She recalled how he sometimes rested a hand on it absent-mindedly, spinning it. Something about the memory stirred her. Rising, she moved closer, running her hand over the curved surface. She tried to lift the globe. It felt heavier than expected. She noticed a subtle seam near the equator line, as if it could be opened. Her heart pounded. Carefully, she pressed and twisted. With a soft click, the globe parted along a hidden hinge, revealing a hollow interior. Tucked inside was a small, worn notebook with a secure clasp. She recognized Martin's handwriting on the first page. Encoded lines, strange notations. She flipped through, seeing references to Sokolov, wire transfers, official payoffs, and other cryptic references. She realized she was staring at evidence that could implicate Sokolov in a wide net of espionage for profit. The relief of finding it was short-lived. As she stood there, the hairs on the back of her neck prickled. She glanced out the window and saw an unfamiliar SUV parked down the dirt road. The occupant inside seemed to be watching. Her mind raced. She realized she might be in immediate danger. She stuffed the notebook in her bag and darted around the cabin, shutting lights off. She slipped out the back door and into the woods behind the house, taking a winding path that led to a smaller side road. The SUV's occupant likely didn't see her go that way. Shaking with adrenaline, she made her way to her car, parked out of view, and left the area, glancing in the rearview mirror every few seconds. No one seemed to follow. For now. On the drive back, Her hands gripped the wheel tightly. She had the notebook, but that meant she was now in possession of something Sokolov desperately wanted. She realized with a cold certainty that life would not be the same. Charlotte had told her MI6 might intervene if they had proof. This notebook was definitely that. But was MI6 trustworthy? Or would they simply confiscate it, leaving her to the wolves? She wasn't sure. She needed more guidance from Charlotte, who seemed the only stable point in this surreal landscape. She managed to contact Charlotte from a payphone, not wanting to risk her cell. Charlotte, upon hearing the discovery, urged her to meet immediately at a neutral spot. They chose a cafe near the train station. Eleanor went there, hugging her coat around her. Charlotte arrived with subdued haste, guiding Eleanor to a quiet table in the back. Eleanor showed her the notebook, flipping pages. Charlotte's eyes widened. This is exactly what Sokolov fears. It details his entire operation. Shell companies, bribed officials, possibly murders arranged to remove obstacles. With this, we can dismantle him. Eleanor felt her heart pound. So what do we do? I've been watched. I was nearly trapped up there. I'm terrified. Charlotte placed a steadying hand on hers. We'll pass it to the right people at MI6, but we have to do it carefully. Sokolov likely has moles. We need to ensure the chain of custody is clean. Let me handle the channels. For now, hide the notebook somewhere secure. Don't take it home. They'll come for it. Eleanor shook her head. I can't believe Martin carried this weight alone all these years. If he had just... Her voice broke. She saw the pity in Charlotte's expression. He did what he thought best to protect you, Charlotte said gently. As soon as he turned rogue for your sake, he lost trust within the agency. He was on his own. Perhaps he didn't want you caught in the crossfire. But in the end, the crossfire found you anyway. Over the next week, a tense dance began. Eleanor, with Charlotte's help, arranged for a secure deposit box in a location Charlotte deemed safe. They placed Martin's notebook there under an assumed name. Charlotte contacted her old MI6 contacts, verifying who was trustworthy. Meanwhile, small signs of danger escalated. A second break-in attempt at Eleanor's apartment, foiled by new locks, suspicious vehicles parked on her street, phone calls at all hours. She grew more anxious, eating poorly, losing sleep. She carried pepper spray in her purse, scanning her surroundings whenever she left the house. Late one evening, a direct threat arrived. A man's voice on the phone demanded she turn over Martin's documents within 24 hours or face consequences. The accent was vaguely Russian, but overshadowed by a quiet menace that chilled her. She hung up, hands trembling. Almost immediately, she called Charlotte. Charlotte's voice was tense. We can't let them corner you. We have to move fast. I've set up a meeting with a liaison at MI6. They'll plan to bring in top-level officers and coordinate an operation against Sokolov. We just need to keep you safe until then. In the following days, the plan took shape. Eleanor and Charlotte traveled under the guise of a short holiday to a neighboring city, carefully ensuring they weren't followed. They met an MI6 official named Harrison in a discreet location, a small conference room in the back of a nondescript government building. Eleanor handed over partial copies of the notebook's pages, preserving the original in the deposit box. Harrison examined them, expressions shifting from curiosity to alarm. He promised immediate action, explaining that Sokolov had grown into a dangerous broker, connecting illicit groups worldwide. This evidence could unravel his empire. Eleanor felt a strange mix of vindication and fear. Martin's final gift was to expose a monster, but it also meant that monster now had her in his sights. A tense waiting period followed. MI6 launched an international effort, coordinating with other agencies, tracking Sokolov's known hideouts. They urged Eleanor to remain in a safe location, but she couldn't bear the thought of cowering in some undisclosed safe house, leaving behind her home, her memories. She insisted on returning to her apartment, at least to gather personal items. Charlotte accompanied her. That afternoon, they found the front door forced open, the living room turned upside down again. Clearly, Sokolov's men had come while she was away. Fear spiked through her. Had they found anything? She recalled that the incriminating notebook was safe in a deposit box. That was her only solace. MI6 swiftly placed her under discreet protection. An unmarked car parked down the street with 2 agents rotating shifts. Charlotte stayed close, occasionally sleeping in a guest room in Eleanor's apartment to ease her nerves. Both women felt the tension mount, waiting for the official word that Sokolov was in custody. Then, late one night, the call came. Harrison reported that Sokolov had been tracked to a private airstrip, preparing to flee the country. An armed team descended, capturing him after a brief standoff. Shots were fired, but no one was killed. Sokolov was taken into custody, and the intelligence community breathed a sigh of relief. Eleanor, however, found that her relief was marred by something else. In the days after Sokolov's arrest, she was pulled into intense debriefings with MI6. Officers questioned her relentlessly, probing every detail of what Martin had told her over the years. They wanted to confirm the authenticity of the notebook, to ensure no pages were missing. They demanded to know if Martin had used her father's connections to glean other secrets. The sessions were long, grueling, emotional. She felt like a suspect more than a victim, forced to revisit every personal memory, every conversation with Martin, searching for hints of clandestine codes or hidden messages. She also faced the humiliating revelation that many in the agency had long known about Martin's compromised status. How he'd started as an operative seducing her but ended up subverting the mission. They never told her because the entire operation was highly classified. She left those interviews feeling drained, as though a piece of her soul had been excavated. The man she loved had walked a perilous line, and now, even after his death, she was the one paying the price. At length, MI6 concluded she was innocent of any wrongdoing, that she genuinely had no idea about Martin's deeper infiltration. They offered her various arrangements in gratitude for her cooperation. Financial settlements, even a suggestion of relocating her under a new identity, in case remnants of Sokolov's network sought revenge. She refused. She couldn't imagine uprooting her life entirely. She was done letting secrecy define her existence. In the aftermath, Charlotte met her for coffee, looking more relaxed than before. She acknowledged that, with Sokolov in custody and the notebook turned over, the immediate threat to Eleanor should fade. Some of Sokolov's henchmen might still roam free, but the agency would keep watch. Charlotte hesitated, then offered an apology. "I've known about you and Martin for years, but I never found the right time to approach you. I saw how he truly loved you. I hope you can find peace with that." Eleanor felt tears gathering in her eyes. "I'm trying to forgive him," she whispered. "He used me at first, but then he turned his back on all of that. He gave up everything for me. I believe that now, but it's still so painful. It's like half of my life was staged, yet the other half was real." Charlotte nodded, sympathy in her gaze. "Take the time you need. He wasn't an evil man. He was caught in a system that thrived on lies." Eleanor went home, pulling from the shelf Martin's personal journal, a different book from the coded one, a leather-bound notebook he used for private musings. She turned its pages slowly, reading sketches of their life. A simple note about how much he enjoyed that summer dinner by the lake, a passage describing his fear that he might not deserve her, lines of gentle poetry referencing the day they married. Her tears fell onto the pages. She realized that the man who wrote those words was no mere spy fulfilling an operation. He had regrets, doubts, but also a depth of devotion that transcended his mission. She ran a trembling finger over the ink, feeling both loss and a strange reassurance. She grew restless, longing for a final reckoning. The city apartment felt tainted by the break-ins, the hush of secrets. So, late that summer, she packed a bag and returned to the lake house. The air was warmer than during her last visit, the sun glinting off the water in tranquil sparkles. This time, she felt no ominous watchers, no sense of immediate danger. She took Martin's personal journal with her, leaving behind the story of Sokolov. The lake house stood as it had before, a testament to simpler memories. She settled into a rickety chair on the small porch, opening the journal. She read page after page, slowly unraveling the layers of Martin's heart. He wrote about the guilt that haunted him, how he'd started their relationship under false pretenses, but soon found himself genuinely enthralled by Eleanor's kindness and wit. He lamented the day he told his superiors he couldn't deliver sensitive intel about her father's trade deals. That betrayal cost him favor in the intelligence world, but he accepted it, claiming it was worth it for love. He worried that if she discovered the truth, she would hate him forever. He wrote, "I want to tell her, but how can I break her trust? Maybe I'll wait until the day I'm sure it's safe." The lines ended abruptly, leaving a half-finished thought. Eleanor closed her eyes, imagining the torment he must have felt. She pictured him returning from some covert assignment, stepping into their home with a forced smile, bearing the weight of 1,000 secrets. A breeze stirred the pine trees. She glanced toward the lake, recalling how they used to swim there at dusk, the sky pink and gold. Those were precious memories. Even if his love began as an act, it didn't remain that way. She could almost hear the echo of his laugh on the dock. Tears coursed down her cheeks, a flood of both sorrow and gratitude. She realized she had a choice: define their marriage by the initial deception or embrace the reality that he'd sacrificed his career and safety to stay with her. A mixture of mercy and anger warred in her heart, but forgiveness began to take root. In the days that followed, she spent hours at the lake house, journaling her own reflections. She detailed her anger, her sense of betrayal, her heartbreak. Then she wrote about the many times Martin had come through for her, comforting her after her father died, cheering her on when she launched a small art business, nursing her through illness. Those moments were no lie. Slowly, she integrated the two narratives, acknowledging that the love they shared was real, even if its beginning was built on falsehood. He had chosen her in the end. That was the truth she clung to. She also wrestled with the knowledge that Martin's secret life had nearly gotten her killed. But Sokolov was caught, dismantled by the evidence Martin left behind. Perhaps Martin always planned for that outcome, ensuring that if he ever died, someone would find the notebook. Perhaps it was his final act of devotion. Her resentment at being the unwitting pawn gave way to a cautious acceptance that he had done the best he could, given the complex world he inhabited. She recognized how espionage warps loyalties, how survival demands illusions. In that labyrinth, he had carved out genuine devotion for her. She made a quiet vow. She would not let bitterness define her. Instead, she would honor the fact that two truths could coexist, that their marriage began with manipulation, and that it ended in authentic love. She decided not to hide away or live under a new identity. She wanted her life to remain hers, not a product of a clandestine war that had already stolen too much. So, after a week by the lake, breathing the pine-scented air, she drove back to the city. She returned to her apartment, found it stale and lonely, but she opened the windows wide to let in fresh air. She told herself it was time to rebuild, step by step. The newspapers soon buzzed with the story of Sokolov's arrest, referencing an international intelligence conspiracy. None mentioned Martin or Eleanor by name. She read them with a wry sense of distance, knowing how deeply her life was entwined in that headline. Charlotte visited, bringing small updates about the follow-up investigations. She mentioned that Sokolov might face trial in multiple countries for espionage and conspiracy. The operation Martin documented had reached far beyond British soil. Eleanor nodded, feeling sorrow for all the shadows that had shaped Martin's existence. At least now, his final stand had made a real difference, exposing one of the worst remnants of the Soviet-era networks. That knowledge gave her a certain pride in him, though it was bittersweet. Occasionally, she faced more official interviews, but they became increasingly routine. The authorities realized she had no further secrets to reveal. They offered her final thanks, suggested she contact them if she ever felt unsafe again. She recognized their sincerity, but she also realized that her trust in official bodies had been deeply shaken. The next time Charlotte stopped by, Eleanor quietly said, "I appreciate your help, but I think I need some space. This entire world Martin lived in. It's too painful to keep connected." Charlotte understood, promising not to intrude but leaving a number in case of emergencies. With that, Eleanor severed her last tie to the espionage realm, focusing on reclaiming her life as her own. In the weeks that followed, she began sorting Martin's personal belongings more thoroughly, deciding what to keep and what to let go. She found old photographs from their earliest days, the two of them at a garden party, Martin's arm around her waist. She spotted a trace of tension on his face, barely noticeable unless you knew to look for it. Had he been caught between duty and budding affection even then? She tucked that photo in her diary, cherishing it for its raw truth. Another photo showed them on holiday in Greece, looking carefree. She wondered if that had been a fleeting moment when Martin forgot he was anything but a devoted husband. She felt a pang, hugging the image to her chest, whispering, "I miss you," to the quiet walls. Neighbors sometimes asked if she was doing all right. She offered polite smiles, saying she was coping. She sensed rumors swirling. 2 break-ins, a car parked out front with tinted windows. But she deflected prying questions. She carried on, resuming small social outings, taking a pottery class to fill her evenings. She found solace in the tactile act of shaping clay, imagining each piece as a small step toward healing. She also took long walks alone, never quite forgetting to check over her shoulder, a habit left from the sense of being followed. Over time, the tension eased. The watchers were gone, replaced by anonymity again. One mild autumn afternoon, she invited her friend Sarah over for tea. She decided to share a carefully edited version of the truth, needing to confide in someone beyond the intelligence world. Over steaming cups, she told Sarah that Martin had been more than a diplomat, that he had gotten tangled in dangerous affairs, culminating in her being threatened. She left out the deeper details, the infiltration or the arranged seduction. Even so, Sarah was stunned. "All these years, I thought he was just, well, normal," Sarah said. "He seemed so mild-mannered, so supportive of you. I can't imagine the strain he must have carried." Eleanor felt tears rise. "Yes," she whispered. "He carried it alone." It comforted her to realize that Martin's kindness was evident to everyone, not just an act for her. After Sarah left, Eleanor sat in the quiet again, reading Martin's personal journal for the dozenth time. She realized she was finally letting go of the anger, embracing a kind of mercy. Martin's original betrayal had been overshadowed by the depth of his devotion. She pictured him meeting her father, perhaps gleaning the information he was ordered to collect, then deciding it wasn't worth the cost. She pictured him, time and again, refusing assignments that would harm her or her family. He had effectively sabotaged his own mission, ensuring that the lie that brought him into her life transformed into genuine partnership. In a system built on manipulation, that was an act of courage. Sometimes, she felt the ache of betrayal return. But each time she reminded herself, he chose her. He could have vanished after the mission was complete, or turned her into a bargaining chip. Instead, he built a life with her. That counted for something. In the end, she decided to set aside the personal journal and keep it close, a tangible reminder that love can transcend even the darkest beginnings. Months passed. The Sokolov scandal slowly faded from headlines, replaced by new crises and political dramas. Eleanor continued her therapy sessions, a gentle counselor who helped her navigate the complicated tangle of grief and resentment. They discussed how one can hold 2 truths in mind: that Martin deceived her, and that he loved her sincerely. The counselor encouraged her to honor the memory of the relationship she cherished, while acknowledging the harm that secrecy caused. Through it, Eleanor found an equilibrium, not a perfect peace, but a functional acceptance. At times, she ventured back to the lake house, especially when city life felt overwhelming. There, she could read novels by the shore or watch the sunset from the dock, the water shimmering under orange and pink skies. She felt closest to Martin in those quiet moments. She would recall how he'd stand behind her, resting hands on her shoulders, breathing in the fresh air. She realized that the tranquility of that place was partly what allowed him to be himself, free from the burdens of espionage. Now it was her refuge as well. One day, while tidying the cabin, she came across a forgotten box of Polaroid photos from the early years of their marriage. In one picture, Martin wore an apron, proudly grilling fish on the back porch, flashing that boyish grin she adored. The memory caught her off guard, and she sank to her knees, pressing the photo to her heart, tears slipping down her cheeks. This was how she wanted to remember him, not as an agent or a liar, but as her husband, flawed yet devoted, forging something real amid the wreckage of a covert world. She resolved to preserve that truth. MI6 still offered a settlement, quietly acknowledging the turmoil she had endured. She refused again, politely, telling them her life wasn't for sale. She also declined any new identity. She had done nothing wrong. She refused to vanish for Martin's sins. Instead, she wrote a personal statement, stored with a lawyer, explaining her side of the story in case any future threat emerged. She was determined to remain in the open, refusing to let fear or shame define her existence. Over time, she found a measure of normalcy. She helped Sarah with a fundraiser for the local library, reconnected with old acquaintances, even considered adopting a rescue dog. The daily tasks of living resumed their place in her life. Yet underneath it all, she carried Martin's memory like a gentle bruise, always present, sometimes aching, but also a testament to love's complexity. Some evenings, she would step onto her city balcony, gazing at the skyline. She'd recall the moment Charlotte told her that Martin had once been ordered to seduce her. She would picture that directive, typed in some shadowy briefing, labeling her as a target. And she would remember Martin's own words in his journal, calling her the best thing that had ever happened to him. The contrast was immense. Somehow, that contrast defined their marriage more than anything else, revealing how love can grow out of even the most twisted origins. One final gesture remained. She felt she owed Martin a tribute, a way to show she had come to terms with his hidden life. So she decided to gather the personal journal, a few treasured photos, and the letters he had written her, placing them in a special wooden box. She labeled it quietly, "Our True Story." Inside, she tucked a small note, "I forgive you. I understand now that you gave up everything for me. Thank you." Then she locked the box, planning to keep it at the lake house, safe from prying eyes. In her mind, this was the core of their marriage, the part that overshadowed all illusions. Eventually, she realized she had no more illusions to break. She had faced Martin's lies, discovered the hidden notebooks, thwarted Sokolov, endured MI6's scrutiny. She had wrestled with heartbreak and found a way forward. She had chosen mercy, forgiveness, and memory. And in doing so, she reclaimed her own story, no longer a pawn in espionage, but a woman who survived and learned the complexity of genuine love. She spent one last weekend at the lake house before the onset of winter, journaling about all that had happened. The crisp wind rattled the trees as she wrote, describing how Martin's biggest sacrifice wasn't just risking his life, but turning away from a mission that contradicted what he found sacred her. She wrote that love sometimes grows in the darkest soil, and only those within it can know its true shape. As she finished her entry, she watched the fading light across the water, feeling a calm she hadn't known in months. Before leaving, she walked down to the edge of the lake with Martin's personal journal in her hands. She stood there, letting the breeze tug at her hair. Quiet tears slipped down her cheeks. She whispered a goodbye to him, not from anger but from a place of acceptance. Then she pressed the journal gently to her chest, closing her eyes, embracing everything that had happened. The lies, the danger, the devotion. She turned and went back inside, placing the journal in the wooden box labeled, "Our True Story." That night, she drove back to the city under a sky full of stars. She felt the hush of the road, the hum of the car, and a gentle sense of release. She might never fully reconcile how her marriage began, but she had chosen how it would be remembered. Even if it was complicated, even if the first step was a lie, the decades of genuine connection overshadowed that beginning. Thank you for watching to the end. If you found this story meaningful, please like this video and subscribe for more.